Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, welcome to the Think Global Middle East edition. My name's David Thomas and I'm joined today by Cynthia and Asma. Welcome both of you.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Now today we're going to talk about Middle Eastern business culture, a session we've called the Iceberg in the Desert. And in our first session we're going to give you an introduction to the core beliefs and values in the Middle East. So perhaps I could start with you, Cynthia. Why do we call it the Iceberg in the Desert?
Well, David, we've called it the iceberg in the desert because, as you probably know, there is a cultural model which represents culture as an iceberg. And if you think about an iceberg, the characteristic feature of it is that a small part sticks out above the water, but most of it is below the water, and that is what culture is like. So if we think about Middle Eastern culture, we can see some specific things about it, like clothing, like language, like customs, food, specific traditions. That's the little bit of the iceberg sticking out of the water. But the vast part of Middle Eastern culture, like all cultures, is actually that bit that's below the waterline. Yeah. You know, that part that's made up of beliefs, attitudes, values, the software of the mind, the way that we're brought up, and the environment that surrounds us.
Yes, good. All right, well, why don't we explore some of the things below the surface? And in particular, why don't we just look at some of the core Arab values and how they relate to us? Yeah.
Well, there are a few. Maybe I'll start and then Asma can give a couple of specific examples. There are a few really important core Arab values, and these include things like family, attitudes to family, status and hierarchy, that's another one, so particular attitudes to people's place in society. The concept of honour is another very important one. And fatalism is also kind of a value, so that concept that you're actually not in control of your own future, that somebody else is controlling your destiny. And religious belief is also another core Arab value. So to give you sort of an overview, those are some of the key ones.
Yeah. And
we could, go back
let's talk about some of them one by one. So let's start with religion, which is, certainly a predominant one.
Yeah, I can talk about religions that everyone in the Arab world believe in God. Most likely it's either you're Muslim or Christian. And you inherit this religion to you, and you don't think to change your religion. We've just considered that God in control of your life. So sometimes if you're not achieving your goals, you might just rely on that it wasn't meant to be for you. So this is the part for the religions. Mm.
Yeah. And how does that relate to us as Westerners looking to do business in the Middle East, the religious aspects?
I think it's really important that you understand what a fundamental part of Middle Eastern culture religion is. So some people will tell you, you can go to the Middle East and religion doesn't play any part in a business dealing. But the fact is that it permeates the culture very deeply. In the West, we're almost, in many societies, in a post-religious culture. But for the majority of people in the Middle East, Islam permeates every part of their day. So you wake up in the morning to hear the call to prayer. In some countries, when it gets to prayer time, everything stops. So shops shut so that people can go and pray. People will actually excuse themselves from a business meeting to go and take 10 minutes to go and say their prayers. You hear it in the way that people speak.
Yeah, when it comes to the business and religion, me being an Arab, I would expect a foreigner when he comes to my country to do business, just to show some respect. And sometimes we would prefer not to talk about your personal view because it's part of our pride. So it's better when you want to do any business in the Middle East, you just get a neutral path don't get involved with extreme views.
Yeah. Because certainly in Western countries, religion doesn't often play a big part in any kind of business transaction. But what I think you're saying is that you just have to be aware that that these things may happen, and not to be fazed by it.
Yeah. And look, as Asma said, everybody in the Middle East has a religion. So, one thing that might come up in conversation if you're doing business in the Middle East is your religious affiliation. And one thing that you shouldn't do is say, I'm an atheist.
Right.
So if you are an atheist, that's fine, but you should
Keep
never
it to
actually...
yourself.
You never say that, because people find that extremely confronting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find it confusing, because this is a culture where everybody believes in God. You're either Christian or you're Muslim. 10% of people are Christian, give or take. 90% are Muslim, and then there are, a few other very minor religions, but everybody believes in God.
Yeah.
And people just don't understand if you don't. So
Yeah.
we always suggest that if it comes up in conversation and you don't believe anything, you just say, my grandparents were Christian, or my family is Christian, or
Yeah.
you just sidestep it.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I think we've solved that problem. So, what about family? Family values are very important in the Middle East, and also tribes and relationships.
Yeah.
How does that relate to business
Like family,
as well?
family. I've been raised in an Arab family, and you have to be loyal to your family, and you have to do what they ask you to do, even if it doesn't go with your preference or what you want to do. You respect your parents, your brothers and sisters, and it goes beyond that to your relatives, because it's not an individual issue. It is like any concern or any issue. It's a concern for the whole family. Mm-hmm. So this is.
And your behaviour impacts on
Yes,
your family,
like even
right?
I live now in Sydney, with my behaviour and attitude. When I want to do something that I feel my parents won't be happy with, that I won't do it.
Yes. Now, how does that relate to foreigners who are looking to do business? Because we all respect our families, we all have some respect for our parents, but obviously it's a lot deeper than that. And how can foreigners tap into that and learn from what you're saying?
I think the foreigners' culture, it's more individual. Like families doesn't interfere with your decision.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is the difference. It's more like it's not really related to do business.
Look, I mean, I think if you wanted to take a very small example, you will sometimes get people begging off meetings or changing meetings with you, and they will say that it's because they have a family commitment that they have to attend to. They have to go to somebody's, their second cousin's aunt's funeral. Now, we would find that quite unbelievable. And if somebody said, I'm sorry, I can't come to meet you even though you've travelled halfway across the world because my second cousin's aunt has died and I must go and give condolences, we'd think that they were actually blowing us off.
Right.
But people take their family commitments very, very seriously. And if that happens, you need to be aware that that's probably genuine, and that if a family matter comes up, it's going to trump everything else, and you might find that your meeting just gets postponed or even cancelled.
Okay, well, that's certainly very normal. So what about honour? This concept of honour sounds a bit scary. What does that mean?
Yeah, honour is just, I think it's the male, I would just talk about it as a cultural thing, not related to the business. Like honour, it's the family will do their best to keep their reputation clean. So with the honour, when it comes to the female, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but she has to stay virgin until she get married. Right. While the male, he needs to be away from prison, because for both sides, not to respect these things, will affect the whole family. Yeah. So this is that kind of honor. Plus, like our culture shows generosity and so that kind of honor. I don't know if I explained it correctly to you or made it clear.
Yeah.
I think in a business context, honor really turns into this concept of faith, which obviously, David, you'll know about from your work in Asia.
Yeah.
And preserving face is very important. So that is all tied up with honour. So one thing that's really important is that if you're in a business meeting or a negotiation, you don't make the person on the other side of the table lose face. Yeah. You don't criticise them directly. You don't blame them for something that's gone wrong. Yeah. You don't put them in an awkward position by asking them for something that they just can't give you. Yeah. And you try to avoid them ever having to say no directly, because I'm sure you'll agree. People in the Middle East,
say no.
They'll never say no to you directly. They will say something like, inshallah. if God is willing, which means by implication that God is not willing, and so therefore it won't happen. But they'll never tell you no. And part of helping people to maintain faith is that you don't put them in that awkward position. Yeah. And conversely, they'll try and do the same for you, because they won't want to put you in a situation where you feel embarrassed or you can't deliver on something.
So how do you turn that around to your advantage? And how can you give honour or give face in a Middle Eastern environment? Have
you got a suggestion on that?
How could we give you honour, Asma?
When you give me something, I feel like I'm going to do it or I can do it. So, or you know what, like you don't make me feel like I won't be able to make it.
Yeah, I think also, you give compliments.
Yeah.
So when you visit Dubai, when you visit Riyadh, when you visit Cairo, as somebody from the West, you can make people feel honoured by complimenting them on the city, by telling them how beautiful their country is, by knowing something about their culture.
Yeah.
And just, I suppose, by relating to them in a way which puts them at ease and doesn't ever put them in a position where they have to directly and bluntly refuse you. Yeah. So really going very softly. I mean, as people from the West, we often tend to be very, very direct. And being direct is not really a good way to help people save face, because it puts a clear message ahead in importance of the relationship. So it's really about always making the relationship the most important thing.
Yeah. Great. Okay, good. Let's keep going. What about this hierarchical nature, the culture around that, the status, hierarchy?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, look, you'll appreciate that Western culture is, it's a flat structure.
Yeah, egalitarian.
It's all based around equality, and we think that essentially everybody is equal, but we have hierarchy and titles as a matter of practicality. It's a pragmatic way of knowing who does what. But in Middle Eastern culture, hierarchy is really deeply embedded in people's psyche. So you have your place in society. Everybody knows where that is, and people really don't really move a lot between those different levels. And as a result, it's very important that you are deferential to people who are above you in the hierarchy. So, for example,
if you go to a meeting, like if a foreigner goes to a meeting, he needs to recognize who's the one on the top of the senior. He needs to show respect, because this person, this is what he's expecting.
Yeah, and apart from titles that might be on the business card, are there any other clues as to the hierarchy, the way they enter the room, the way they sit around the table?
We were discussing this before, and this can be very...
I told her he normally he will be in the middle, like the first one, and everyone will be away a little bit, so they show that this is the boss.
You really have to read people's body language, because often, especially if you go to the Gulf, men will be wearing traditional dress, which is the white dish dash, which looks like a white dress, and their headdress is often white as well, with the black band around the top. And so everybody looks quite similar, and the only way that you can really tell is by watching people's body language and the way the other people in the room relate to them.
So pick up those sort of cues to understand the hierarchy, because it's very important to them. Yeah.
And look, I was going to say also that within companies in the Middle East, you won't find people calling the CEO by his first name. Nobody will say, "Oh, hi, David," in the morning. It'll always be Sir.
You don't
or
see
Mr.
him.
Thomas. Or you don't see him at all.
You don't see the CEO very often.
No.
Yeah.
No. And if you did, I'm sure you'd know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
From the way everybody else behaved around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Now, what about fatalism? That sounds interesting.
So this is the concept of, in Arabic, the word is al-qadr, and it means destiny, and it's...
Of the faith, or it's what God meant, like in religion, in our religion, like you do your best, but if God decided you're not getting this, you're not going to do this. So the majority will rely on that God won't. Let me get this. So some of them won't do the effort.
So it's the opposite of control. So
yes,
in the Westerners control outcomes. In the Middle Eastern culture, it's more...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.